And also Dr. Swami and his co-staff for giving me this opportunity to deliver the lecture on the fundamental of disaster management. Okay. I'm going to share with all of you about the fundamental knowledge related to this science, which is disaster management. So I am basically a scientist involved in various earth science activities, and this lecture will be slightly deviating from that one. So I welcome all of you for this lecture, and we will continue with things. Natural disasters, definition of that one, meaning of that one, types and disaster cycle. All these things we will discuss in a couple of hours. So let me start with the thought of the day. You know, yesterday is a past, tomorrow is a future, but today is a gift. That's why it's called present. And we should not forget that the present is key to the past. So whatever we study now, we can extend it back to our past. What has happened? Because, say, for example, if you take how Earth formed in the solar system, we have not witnessed that one. So whatever the evidences that are available on this Earth now, that can be extended, and we can say, oh, this has formed like this has formed like that. So these things can be told. That's why the quote, present is key to the past, is a very familiar thing with us scientists. Coming to the content of the talk, I would like to discuss with you the introduction part, definition of disaster, classification and types of disaster, disaster management and cycle, nodal ministry of disaster. So these things we will discuss in the part of this lecture. So let me start with the definition of the word disaster. See, disaster is a word that is generated or originated from Greek language. Dus, D-U-S, dus means bad, and A-S-T-R means star, S-T-A-R. The root of disaster comes from an astrological sense of a calamity blamed on the position of a planet. That means whenever the disaster in the previous days, that means many centuries ago, if it takes place, means they used to connect it to the astrology, the placement of the planets and its effect on the Earth, like that. Okay, so health sector emergency managers, they are concerned with public safety and public health. Clients are threatened or injured and damaged during disasters. That's what is going to happen. Whenever any kind of disasters take place, the common people are people will be threatened or injured during that, and damage will be done to them. So Disaster Management Act, after seeing all these things, the Disaster Management Act was established in the year 2005. So that means disaster is a sudden calamitous event bringing great damage, loss, destruction, and devastation to life and property. So coming to the definition of a disaster, any occurrence that causes damage, ecological disruption, loss of human life, deterioration of health and health services, sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community. This is how the World Health Organization has defined the disaster. So a disaster can be defined as an occurrence either natural or man-made that causes human suffering and creates human needs that victim cannot alleviate without assistance. See, we need the assistance of people during the course of the disaster. Okay, American Red Cross or any other organization that I am going to discuss in future part of the lecture. Disaster is an emergency in which local authorities cannot cope. The goal of emergency management is to protect public health. We should not forget that all disasters are emergencies, but not all emergencies are disasters. So, alphabetically, the word disaster has been defined like this. See, D-I-S-A-S-T-E-R. So, in that, D stands for detection, I stands for incident command, S stands for safety and security, A stands for assessment, another S stands for support, T stands for triage and treatment, E stands for evaluation, and R stands for recovery. Kinds of disasters. Disasters of different kinds or different categories. There is a typological one. It is either natural or man-made to vulnerability. It is defined as the extent to which a community structure It is defined as the extent to which a community structure, services, or geographic area is likely to be damaged by the impact of particular hazard or on account of their nature, construction, proximity to hazardous terrain. So, based on all these aspects, the disasters have been categorized as neither anticipated nor expected. There are certain disasters we cannot anticipate, oh, it's going to happen in another 6 months or 3 months, like that. Suddenly it may happen. It is not expected. Next type is anticipated but not expected. Okay, you can anticipate, oh, someday this area is going to witness an earthquake, but not expected. We cannot tell the date and time and everything. But there are some disasters which are anticipated and also expected. No government is sorry. No government is interested to see their citizen to face the deprived situation out of such disasters. The disasters with severe damages, mitigation has to be started. Disaster monitoring follows with mitigation. Okay, say unless you control the things, you cannot monitor. There are three important elements such as preparedness, prevention, and mitigation. Okay, whenever there is a disaster, if you anticipate, you should try to prevent it. So to prevention comes from mitigation. So mitigation aspects has to be considered. Suppose if it takes place suddenly, then one should be prepared. So that's why disaster monitoring follows with these three things: preparedness, prevention, and mitigation. Prevention cannot be maintained as long as natural disasters concerned, whereas one can make the people's confidence by way of preparedness. Under the preparedness, the society has to be alerted with sufficient knowledge on kinds of damages and the means of protecting them during the course of facing any unexpected disasters. After the disasters, the recovery, resetting of the people, completion of the warranted re-engineering, it also needs sufficient coordination from the society. That's the most important thing. Unless we cooperate, we coordinate with each other, it is very difficult in the case of any kind of disaster. Of all, to keep a person knowledgeable on the events to take place is the most important action. That's why nowadays there is a stress to give a training with respect to the disasters, even to a common man. So, disasters are mainly natural disasters and man-made disasters. See, what are these natural disasters? They include droughts, earthquakes, tsunamis, forest fires, landslides and mudslides, blizzards, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and volcanic disruptions. So, this because of some natural changes, maybe due to climatic change or tectonic plates movement or any other thing, these kind of disasters takes place. So, this needs to be always subjected to monitoring, studies, so that we can understand, at least we can gauge, oh, this is going to happen in particular area, like that. Man-made disasters. This may be due to anything, includes hazardous substance accidents, chemicals, toxic gases, radiologic accidents. So, and radiation, nuclear radiation may erupt because of accident in a nuclear energy unit. Dam failures. Okay, if the construction is poor, dam may fail, or maybe it may not be able to withhold the impounding water capability. So such things will happen. Resource shortage. Example, food shortage, electricity and water, all these things will add to these kind of disasters. Structural fire and explosions and domestic disturbances. They are all man-made disasters. For example, terrorism, bombing, riots, bioterrorism, explosions, all these things, they are categorized under man-made disasters. So, disaster means it is either natural or it can be man-made. Fires, toxic materials, pollution, civil unrest, that is riots, demonstrations, etc., terrorist attacks, all these are man-made disasters. Throughout the history, both natural and man-made disasters have disrupted food and water supplies. Okay, the most problem during a disaster is these two things are affected: food and water supplies, and saltation causing communicable diseases, injury, illness, and death. All these things, they happen whether it is a natural disaster or a man-made disaster or a mixed disaster. So major natural disasters, they include flood, okay, cyclone, drought, earthquake. Okay, minor natural disasters are there. They are cold wave, thunderstorms, heat wave, mudslides. Okay, so a disaster can be a major one or can be a minor one. So depending upon the source of that disaster, these things will happen. So natural disasters, they have been categorized into types and subtypes: biological, natural disaster; geophysical. Instead of the word geophysical, we can put the word geological there. Hydrological, that is, it comes under hydrometeorological category, hydrological and meteorological. So what are the natural disasters that we can expect with a biological disaster category? Epidemic, mainly epidemic. Viral infectious disease, bacterial infectious disease, parasitic infectious disease, fungal infectious disease, prion infectious disease, insect infestation, animal stampede, any of these things. Okay, this one confrontation with the elephants and the man also will lead to these things, animal stampede. Come to geological: earthquakes, volcano, mass movement. If it is because of geological things, mass movement can take place in a dry condition. Dry condition, a rock fall may take place, landslide may take place, avalanche may take place, subsidence may take place. Coming to the hydrological type: flood, mainly with water, general flood, storm surge, coastal flood. Here, because of the water and mass movement may take place under wet condition, there also you can expect rockfall, landslides, avalanche, subsidence. Coming to the meteorological type of disaster, it includes mainly storm, tropical cyclone, extratropical cyclone, local storm. Climatological includes extreme temperature. See, heat wave, cold wave, extreme winter condition. Nowadays, in the major cities, you have heat islands are being developed. That means city part will be, core of the city will be with heat compared to the peripheral part of the cities. So these are all also may lead to disasters. Drought and wildfire, forest fire, land fire. So all these kind of disasters can take place in nature, which are natural: biological, geophysical or geological, hydrometeorological, which includes hydrological and meteorological type of disasters. So you can see what happens when an earthquake takes place. So entire devastation of a huge building or roads, anything can be disrupted during an earthquake. Okay, so we will be finished if an earthquake actually takes place, because especially in a country like Japan, earthquake is a very common phenomenon. Okay, so because it is situated in the ring of fire zone, right? There, the tectonic plates are very active. Often earthquake takes place there. So after studying this one for many years, they have come to the conclusion regarding the construction of the building or how to survive. They give the training how to survive during the earthquake for each citizen. That's most important thing. So this is an image of an earthquake. I think which most of you might have seen these things. Okay, so this is volcanic eruption. Even volcanic eruption also induces so many things related to the disasters. Okay, the lava comes out, hot lava, maybe of temperature of 1500 degrees centigrade. If it is more mobile, lava can be viscous or it can be mobile, depending on the composition. Okay, if it is a mobile lava, it can flow. If habitation is there in the surrounding area, they will get definitely affected with this kind of volcanic eruptions. But during volcanic eruption also, mild earthquake also can take place, because the lava comes from the deep interior of the earth, that is from the mantle region, what we call it as mantle region. From that, through vents, it enters into the crustal region of the earth. So while pushing the crust, some of the crustal part may get slightly tectonically disturbed. Okay, this results in the movement. So usually volcanic eruptions are accompanied by earthquakes in that local regions. So meteorological disasters include flood. Mostly they occur in June and September. Tsunami, you have heard of tsunami. International Tsunami Center is situated in Honolulu, Hawaii. Cyclones, hurricanes, all these are meteorological type of disasters. Typhoons, okay? So tropical storm with strong winds, they form the typhoons. Blizzards, blizzard means storm with strong winds and snow, okay? Of course, these kind of things are not much seen in our subcontinent. Hailstorm, sudden drop in temperature will lead to hailstorm. In some areas, it will be huge, but we receive sometimes here in our tropical regions. Snowstorm will be there. So totally a disaster can take place because of these kind of calamities. Coming to the man-made disaster. What are the major man-made disasters? Setting of fires, epidemic, deforestation. Nowadays, they are removing the forest like anything. Deforestation is a man-made thing. But added to that, a natural disaster happens. If you deforest a mountain area, then the rocks on that mountain area will slide down because of gravity, and it may affect the people who are living in the lower lying areas. Pollution due to prawn cultivation. Okay, prawn cultivation, the pollution of both surface and groundwater takes place because of prawn cultivation due to their pollutants. It increases soil salinity and reduces soil fertility. Chemical pollution and wars. Okay, so these things, they are disasters that are created by man. Coming to the minor man-made disasters, road, train accidents, maybe due to negligence or some other factors, riots, food poisoning, okay, individual disasters, crisis, environmental pollution. All these things, they are minor man-made disasters. Primarily, disasters agents include falling buildings, heat, wind, rising water, and smoke. Secondary agents include bacteria and viruses that produce contamination or infection after the primary agent has caused injury or destruction. So, there are various environmental factors which account for the disasters. There are physical factors, chemical factors, biological factors, social factors, psychological factors. Disasters are incubated by these agents acting independently or collectively. The agents could be social, political, environmental, or underdevelopment factors. How the agents act individually and collectively to create disaster depends on the context within which they occur. So, whatever may be the type of the disaster, okay, disaster, if you consider it as a guest, the host will be always humankind. So, most of the living beings are affected because of the disasters. Age, sex, immunization status, pre-existing health, degree of mobility, emotional stability, all these things, they constitute the host part of the disaster. Risk always is equal to hazard plus vulnerability. For example, an earthquake hazard of the same magnitude in a sparsely populated village of Rajasthan and in the densely populated city of Delhi will cause different levels of damage to human lives, property, and economic activities. Okay, so it depends on the concentration of the population also, concentration of the building also. In a sparsely filled area, this earthquake may not affect more, but with all these establishments and human population, in that area, if any earthquake takes place, it will be of a severe kind. So, there is two types of emergencies, non-disaster emergencies and disaster emergencies. Coming to the physiography of India and disaster. Okay, how our Indian subcontinent is prone to disasters. India is a subcontinent with wider landscapes and man-made. India is a subcontinent with wider landscapes and manifested with number of major hills and rivers, plateau and dense forest. The geological and close geographical formations in India are so weak and non-resistive to disasters. By area, India is susceptible to all types of physiographic forms. It is the sixth largest country in the world with the share of 135.79 million square kilometers. That means 2.4% of the world's surface area. Whereas the population of India within this area, a small area, it goes to 16.4%. So you imagine how much is the area and how much is the occupation of the population. In the north and northeastern parts are the youngest mountain chains. Himalaya is highly susceptible to earthquake, landslides, and avalanches. So this is the physiographic map of India. So we can see here three parts for this. So those who have studied geography or geology or any other natural science subjects, they will be aware of this thing. So it has three parts. To the south of India, we have peninsular India. Middle part is Indo-Gangetic Alluvium, and northern part is extra-peninsular India. Extra-peninsular India is mainly made up of tectonic mountain region. Okay, it is mainly made up of Himalayas. Himalayas is tectonically very active. And if you take the age of Himalayas, it is young. It is around 70 million years old. And still, our subcontinent is in movement. Okay, it is dynamic in nature. So it is always it is moving in the northeastern direction and hitting the Tibetan plate. So during that period, what happens? Part of the Indian plate slowly getting down. It is subducting and also hitting each other. So rising of the Himalayas is taking place. That means totally it is tectonically active. So whenever the stress is released along these areas, earthquake will take place. That's why it is a tectonically active area prone to different kinds of disasters. Coming to the Indo-Gangetic Alluvium, we have rivers, different rivers. They cause flood in this region. So compared to the extra-peninsular India and Indo-Gangetic Alluvium, southern part of the India, which is made up of peninsular gneissic rocks, it's called peninsular India, is to some extent it is stable, except in the shear zones. Shear zones means even this hard crust is dissected. So along those seasons, it becomes a very weak zone. There, if there is any movement, then earthquake can take place here. Okay, so India is with peninsular India, Indo-Gangetic Alluvium, and extra-peninsular India. But all these areas, they are vulnerable to one kind of the disaster or the other. Indo-Gangetic plain is prone to floods as well as drought. Northwestern part is prone to drought and desertification, while coastal regions are prone to tsunamis and cyclones. Okay, so that's very common with the coastal regions. In other words, the country is susceptible to all types of disasters. That is, earthquakes, droughts, flood, cyclones, tsunamis, landslides, avalanches, desertification, forest fires, and industrial and vehicle accidents, road, rail, or air. In the world, 90% of the disasters, unfortunately, is occurring in the developing countries because we have not taken more care to avoid it. Okay, so that means our country is prone to these different kinds of disasters with this much of population, and we have to very carefully manage these kind of things. In India, 70% area is drought prone, 60% area is earthquake prone, 12% flood prone, and 8% cyclone prone. These percentage figures shows that there is need of trained manpower that can assist at the time of disaster, as well as in planning of schemes, monitoring, and management of disasters. So that means now it is the right time to create awareness regarding the general public people or the youngsters regarding the types of disasters that can happen in our country and how to manage with that one, how to mitigate that one, how to prepare for it. All these things needs to be done. In the present context of changing technological scenario, there is urgent need for trained manpower for oil industry as well as government or innovative organization. So that is the thing. Training has to be given. As we have the Himalayan plate of world surface, it's an overriding plate boundary. It is a tectonic plate. See, the entire globe is divided into different plates. Plate means it is having a thickness of 100 to 120 kilometers from the surface of the earth to the down bottom. Okay, all these plates, they are in movement with respect to each other. There are continental plates, there are oceanic plates. What happens when they are in respect, movement in respect to with each other? Sometimes continental plate may come against the oceanic plate. Density wise, continental plate is having lower density, whereas the oceanic plate is having higher density. So higher density material goes down. It is called subduction. Okay. Sometimes what happens, the two oceanic plates, which are of same density, they move away from each other. In that area, what happens? Magma from below enters into the surface. Okay, so the best place is Hawaiian Islands or the Atlantic Ocean, where mid-oceanic result is situated. Okay. Similarly, a continent-continent collision may take place, like Indian plate hitting the Tibetan plate. Okay. So what happens whenever they hit against each other, the mounting takes place. So grows. We say that mountain is growing. So Himalaya is rising in its height. That's what we have observed. So whenever these things happens, it will lead to definitely earthquake. So we have to face frequently the natural disasters in that region, whether earthquake or landslide or any other thing related to that. The devastating type of disasters is basically accounted to be of two types, namely natural and anthropogenic. Natural disasters are those occurring beyond the control of human beings and virtually not predictable, whereas the anthropogenic disasters are of those taking place due to human interventions and activities like road, rail, air, and industrial accidents. Okay, so broadly, we should understand that if it is a natural disaster, it is very difficult to predict, first of all. Okay, we should be always we can try to mitigate it, and also we should have a follow-up of preparedness for it. Whereas in the man-made, we ourselves should be very careful. Okay, otherwise we may end up with many kinds of disasters. Now, let us discuss about disaster management and cycle, how this works out. Okay, so disaster management. What is this disaster management? Disaster management, we can understand this through these four headings: preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation. What is this preparedness? Activities prior to a disaster. Whatever the activities, that means a disaster may happen in this region. So we have to prepare for it. That kind of preparatory thing should be there. Example, preparedness plans, emergency exercise training, warning systems, these things needs to be done. Coming to the response type, in the activities during a disaster. So response means how we are going to respond to that particular disaster. That means a disaster has taken place, how we have to actively respond for it. This we can do with public warning systems, emergency operations, search and rescue. Coming to the recovery, so we have to recover ourselves from the disaster. Activities following a disaster. For example, we have to have temporary housing for many people who have lost their houses, claims processing and grants, long-term medical care and counseling. These things will help to recover from the disaster incidents. Mitigation, activities that reduce the effects of disasters. Okay, for example, there are certain areas where often landslides take place. So how to mitigate it? So some kind of fencing system can be made in that particular area. So these things are designed by the engineers actually. Civil engineers, they do and see that they can reduce the effect of that particular landslide. Like that. Building codes and zoning. See, for example, you cannot construct the buildings, especially high-rise structures in all areas, because it should be followed with a what is known as BCC. BCC means Building Construction Code. Unless one passes through this code, you cannot expect any guarantee for the building, any guarantee for the structure, because you might have constructed along a lineament, okay, where whenever earthquake takes place along a shear zone or a lineament, shaking will become very easy. So building may collapse. So that means mitigation means these are all the things that has to be kept in mind. Building codes and zoning, vulnerability analysis, public education. Okay, so on constructing things. First, we should study the terrain. What are the features of this terrain? Whether this terrain is vulnerable to earthquake or flood or landslide, then only we can go for construction. So these kind of mitigation activities should be there so that its effect can be reduced. Phases of disaster management. First is the mitigation phase, control, how to control it. Then preparedness, how to be prepared for a disaster. Then if any disaster happens, response phase, how to respond for it. And then recovery phase. So we have to respond to the disaster and we have to recover from that. So these things should be followed very carefully and systematically. Then only we can keep the things in a normal condition. Principles of disaster management. Prevent the occurrence of the disaster whenever possible. Minimize the number of casualties if the disaster cannot be prevented. That's most important. Minimize the number of casualties if the disasters cannot be prevented. Prevent further casualties from occurring after the initial impact of the disaster. See what happens, sometimes earthquake takes place. So immediate aftermath the earthquake, some shaking may also take place. Okay, so we should gear up for that one. We should have in our mind. So earthquake has taken place and it may going to trigger further again and again. So what we have to do for it? Okay, so we can prevent the casualties if you understand these things. And rescue the victims. That's most important thing. Whenever a disaster takes place, we have to rescue each victim. Provide first aid to the injured. There is a systematic way that I am going to discuss in the later part of the lecture. Provide first aid to the injured. Evacuate the injured to the medical facilities. Provide definitive medical care. Because medical care means it involves all kinds of things during such situations. So depending upon the kind of the care that is required for a person, that has to be done. And promote reconstruction of lives. That's most important thing, because during a disaster we may lose everything. We might have built a huge building, we might have so many things in the house, etc., etc. But a single earthquake can devastate us. Okay, so from that we have to come back, we have to recover. So we have to reconstruct our lives. For that, our management has to be done properly. That's where the principles of disaster management stays. Mitigation. Working with local, state, and federal agencies in identifying disaster risks, on developing disaster prevention strategies through extensive public education in disaster prevention and readiness. Okay, that means whatever the agencies are there, whether it is a local agency, panchayat level, state level, or federal agencies. Okay, so in identifying the risk, we should involve all these people. Okay, then we have to plan for disaster prevention plan. Strategy has to be done. Okay, so this we can achieve through public education in disaster prevention and readiness. To plan effectively for disaster prevention, the nurse need to have a community assessment information, including knowledge of community resources. For example, emergency services, hospitals and clinics, community with health personnel, example, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, emergency medical teams, dentists and volunteers, community government officials and local industry. So if we gear up the minds of all these kind of agencies and people, we can control the disaster to some extent, so that their participation will become very immediate and loss of life can be saved. Then comes the preparedness. Personal preparedness, stress and conflict among disaster workers. That should not be there. We have to prepare the personnel in such a way that they should not, the person who is going to help the disaster should not suffer from stress and conflict. Okay, that's most important thing. Professional preparedness should be there. That means whatever the license, equipment, personal equipment, such as a stethoscope, a flashlight, and extra batteries, cash, warm clothing and a heavy jacket, or weather appropriate clothing, record keeping materials, pocket size reference books, etc., etc. It has to be professionally prepared. Okay, then community preparedness, that means participation of different kinds of people for this is very much required. Unless we all join hand, we cannot recover from a disaster. Role in preparedness. Within the employing organization, help initiate or update the disaster plan, provide educational programs and material regarding disasters specific to the area, and organize disaster drills. Community health nurse, provide an updated record of vulnerable populations within the community. Individualized strategies should be reviewed, including the availability of specific resources in the event of an emergency. Leader, an intimate knowledge of the institution and familiarity with the individuals who work there. Persons with the disaster management training, and especially those who have served on real disasters, make valuable members of any preparedness team as well. That means we should have a team, but the team or people who work in that team should have a better background about the disasters, about the real disasters. Okay, then that disaster can be managed very well. As a community advocate, should always seek to keep a safe environment, recalling that disasters are not only natural, but also man-made. The nurse in the community has an obligation to assess for and report environmental health hazards. Other than this, we have what community resources will be available after a disaster strikes, and most important. Okay, so that we should have a plan of it. What are the things that are available here in this particular area where the disaster may take place in future? A study of them should be there. How the community will work together. We have to prepare the community to work together. What should occur before, during, and after the response, and his or her role within the plan. This is also very important. So before, what they have to do, during what they have to do, and after what they have to do. That means how they respond to these situations. For them, we have to make them up. Community health nurse who seeks greater involvement or a more in-depth understanding of disaster management can become involved in any number of community organizations that are part of the official response team, such as Red Cross, Salvation Army, or emergency medical system, ambulance corps, etc., etc. Okay, so this helps in greater involvement in understanding the disaster management. Okay, so that way management of the disaster has to be done. Coming to the response part of it, it includes community assessment, case finding and referring, prevention, health education, surveillance, and working with aggregates. Okay, see, community assessment should be done, case finding has to be found, and referring has to be done, prevention has to be done, health education, especially with diseases, surveillance, and working with aggregates. Local and regional emergency and public health resources can be readjusted as assessment reports continue to come in. Okay. Shelter management, responsibility of the local Red Cross, building of tent cities. So in case of disaster, many may lose their homes and other things. So building of tent cities has to be done. Assessing and deferring, ensuring medical needs, providing first aid, serving meals, keeping patient records, ensuring emergency communications and transportation, and providing a safe environment. So all these constitute the shelter management part of the disaster management. So disaster impact and response, these we can understand through these following headings: search, rescue, and first aid, field care, triage. I'm going to discuss on triage, tagging, identification of dead. All these things will happen. So totally, it is a very comprehensive work to come out of a disaster. Disaster impact and response. Actions taken in anticipation of, during, and immediately after impact to ensure that its effects are minimized and that people are given immediate relief and support. This is most important. Immediate relief and support should be given. A set of principles which provide a framework for managing any event is command, control, coordination, communication, clinical management, continuity, and capability. So all these things, it forms a framework. Okay, it is a set of principles. This provides the framework to manage the things. So commander should be strong. He should have undergone very good training. He should have undergone the actual field training of the things, control of the things. He has to control, he has to coordinate, he has to communicate with the people. Okay, and especially while dealing with clinical management is very important. Continuity should be there and capability. All these factors, they work out. International relief reports, international relief efforts, Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies and the International Committee of Red Cross are as health representatives from the WHO. Psychological stress of disaster workers. The degree of worker stress depends on the nature of the disaster, role in the disaster, individual stamina, and other environmental factors. Okay, that means psychological part of a worker is also very important. Okay, what one has to immediately digest to his mind, what is this nature of disaster and what role he can do in the disaster. And the stamina he should have. If it may require very physical standards so that we can rescue some people. Individual stamina is very important and other environmental factors. He should be able to adjust to different kinds of environment, high temperature, sudden cold. Environmental factors. This includes noise, inadequate workspace, physical danger, and stimulus overload, stress, mood swings, frustration, and conflict. All these things, they come under this environmental factors. So, international relief efforts should be there. Psychological stress of disaster workers should be maintained. Environmental factors needs to be maintained. Disaster recovery includes flexibility, community cleanup efforts, release of continuing threat, teaching proper hygiene, short-term psychological support, alert for environmental health hazards, home visits. So, during recovery, these things has to be very carefully maintained. Flexibility should be there. Community cleanup efforts should be there. So, release of continuing threat. So, they should be free from any threats. See what happens whenever a disaster takes place, suddenly panic will be there among the people. Okay, so that panic should not live with them for a longer period. Okay, so that has to be brought down. So this psychologically they have to be worked out and brought to the normal level. Okay, and during any disasters, maybe improper hygiene may happen. Okay, so how to be hygienic during that period? That needs to be done. These things of the short-term psychological support. Alert for environmental health hazards. Okay, so one hazard should not lead to other. Okay, so health hazard should not be against spurt out because of these things. And home visits should be there after the disaster, whether they have recovered properly or not. For that, these volunteers should go to their homes and convince them and see that they are into the normal condition.